State Senator Rob Sampson. Senator Sampson put a statement out, I think just yesterday.
I put a statement out just about every day, Steve.
Okay. All right.
And thanks for having me.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, we've got a couple of questions over the last few days about where are our legislators? Why aren't they speaking out? Why aren't they a part of more of these protests? Why aren't they, working to make the other side of this argument heard when the governor seems to have the bully pulpit? He's having these press conferences every day, and everybody, is hanging on every syllable. And but there's people out there that are disagreeing with what he's got lined up here and how he's handling this. But there doesn't seem to be much public outcry about it. But as you stated very, very clearly on this, what can you do? If you're not in session, not making speeches and not voting, well, the best you can do is what you're doing, and that's releasing these statements on a regular basis.
Right. It's a frustration of mine as well, Steve. And I'm with those people who are angry at their legislators for not being more active and, speaking out. I want to assure them that I am. I mean, I'm every day calling attention to the actions of our governor, and whether I agree or disagree, whether I find his decision-making to be in line with what is lawful. And, I think that's about all I'm limited to, unfortunately. We were talking off air about this frustration that I have, too, because I would like very much to be able to do more than this. And the staff attorneys at the Capitol, they're probably tired of hearing me ask them about what our options are. And in fact, I actually shared on Facebook a few days ago what our options actually are to end the lockdown, which is, number one, the governor has to relent, which is a matter of public opinion. I think if the public makes it clear that they disagree with his actions, he's going to have to change course. Number two is federal interaction. I wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the United States outlining some of the concerns I had about the governor's executive orders and whether they were constitutional. But so far I haven't had a response. And I was saddened that only 11 of my colleagues out of 186, there's 187, including myself, total legislators, 36 senators and 151 representatives, but only 11 of them joined me to question the governor's actions in that letter to the Attorney General. And then finally is legal action inside the state. And there's a great concern there because I don't know if I trust the Connecticut courts to come out with the right decision. And, losing might be worse than doing an action altogether. But that being said, I will announce for you right here for the first time publicly, Steve, that I'm involved with a couple of other colleagues and businesses across our state. And we are, in fact, working on the final touches to put a legal action forward to stop the governor's, some of his things. Number one, the executive order about essential versus non-essential. And basically because I don't believe that the governor has the power to make that determination. And the forced closings as a result.
I was thinking about this over the weekend, the juxtaposition between what the governor is trying to do here and what our Constitution says is how our government should be set up. And that is, there is a legislative branch that makes the laws, and then the executive branch enforces the laws. I mean, this is basic Constitution 101 civics lessons classes that we're talking about here. And yet somehow, because of this particular pandemic, all of that gets thrown out the window. And I just don't remember any part in the Constitution that says that, by the way, this is all null and void if you happen to have a bad flu season.
You're absolutely right. Steve, the sad part about all lawmaking is that it is subject to the scrutiny of the courts and public opinion as a result. There are a lot of laws on the books in Connecticut and across the country which I believe are unconstitutional. And in fact, sometimes they are challenged and they are thrown out. I joke with people all the time that in other states, when that happens and laws are found to be unconstitutional, their legislatures go back and repeal them. But not in Connecticut. They just leave it on the books and try for round two. And there are so many disputable items in the governor's actions over the last several months. And I've talked to a lot of different people about what course of action we have on each of them. I think I said on your program the last time that I thought that the rental assistance program that the governor had enacted was certainly a breach of our U.S. Constitution because it violates private contracts between citizens. It also exceeds his authority that he has. And we could certainly talk about that. If you're interested, I can tell you what I think the governor's authority is and where he has breached it.
Yeah, I mean, and because I was talking to my wife about this, we went for a walk on Monday night, and there was a story that came out about the governor issuing another executive order giving the police the power to enforce his edicts. And I said, this is not how it's supposed to work.
Right.
You can't just issue an edict or an executive order and then have another executive order giving the law enforcement professionals the right to enforce these rules that you're creating. It's not how it's supposed to work.
Right. Yeah, he is operating under a law that was created, I believe it's 28-9, and essentially it is the emergency powers that enable the governor to rule by executive order during a pandemic or a civil preparedness emergency as it's described in the statute. But that statute, which I think is unconstitutional on its face, by the way, because in the Connecticut Constitution, it's very clear that the duty of lawmaking is the responsibility of the legislature alone. So I don't know if the legislature, when they passed that Civil Preparedness Act many, many years ago, was even acting lawfully. I don't think that action itself is constitutional. But be that as may, it limits the governor to modifying existing statutes for the purpose of public health. That is the extent of his authority. So when he's creating law out of whole cloth, which I believe he has when he declared certain businesses essential and others non-essential, I think he's exceeding his authority, and that will be the basis of our argument. And then the further actions, I don't know that there is a statute that allows the state government to decide which businesses should be open or not based on being essential or non-essential. And that, to me, is another law created from nothing, not a modification of an existing law. And I think that will be the dispute. What does the word modify mean? And I would argue that they use the word modify in the statute and not create for a reason.
There's just been so many different moments where there's been overreach, there's been confusing messaging coming out of the governor's office. Just this week, we've seen with his decision to remove the right for salon owners and barbershops to open up, with his reasoning, again, being extremely specious, in my opinion. Number one, because they all can't open up, none of them can open up. And number two, we have to be more in alignment with Massachusetts and Rhode Island, which, right. Again, I'm still trying to figure out, and I asked Representative Candelora about this, too. What does that even mean? We didn't vote for the governor of Massachusetts to make decisions about our state. We didn't vote for the governor of Rhode Island. But it seems he's always kind of used that excuse as, well, the governor of Rhode Island is doing it, so we're going to do it, too. The governor of New York is doing it, so we're going to do it, too. Right, completely.
Yeah, he's involved a lot of out-of-state interests in decision-making for the state. The $2 million out-of-state consultants, and of course his Reopen Advisory Board, which I thought was responsible for that duty to begin with. It's like how many advisors do you need to make decisions? But there's out-of-state people on there. That in itself is another questionable constitutional action by the governor, making compacts with other states about how we're going to proceed in this particular case. The whole argument that I'm going to make in the legal way is based on whether or not the governor is acting in an arbitrary and capricious way. And I believe what has happened both with the hair dryers first, and then the whole reversal and flip flop on whether or not salons can open on May 20th is so obvious that he was doing it for political purposes, which is what we have not been told all along. They've been saying that we are doing this for medical science. That is how decisions are being made, and clearly that's just not true. So I wonder, was the original date of May 20th based on medical science, or was the flip-flop based on medical science? And I would argue that neither one of them were. He decided to reverse the 520 reopening simply because he heard from constituents, and a little political pressure was applied, And now political pressure is being applied in the opposite direction because those salon owners who had prepared to open at great expense. I have a dear friend who owns a salon in Watertown, and I know what she went through to prepare her salon, to get it up to speed, to meet all of the requirements, spending day after day calling her, customers and rescheduling them, and then to be told less than 48 hours beforehand, oh, no, just kidding, and all because the governor heard from, a group of disgruntled folks who were upset about, the reopening. So now you're going to have the opposite pushback, and we'll see what happens.
It's interesting how the governor throws lines like that out there, because he did the same thing during the tolls debate. It was like, well, I've heard from people all over the state that think that tolls are going to be a wonderful idea and we need to move forward with tolls. And how do those people, and only those people, seem to be able to get a direct line to the governor's office and he'll take their call or he'll speak with them? He never talks about people who are on the other side, who have a difference of opinion. Like you said, these salon owners that were prepared to open, these salon owners that did follow the guidelines they were given. And now all of a sudden, I've only heard from people who don't want to open. I haven't, did you not hear from people who do want to open? Because I tell you what, right now in Hartford and down in New Haven yesterday, there were a lot of people who want to open who were making some pretty clear statement here. You don't talk about those people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they were vocal. But certainly not their fault. They didn't have a reason to be vocal. They had full expectation based on the previous statements and executive orders of the governor that they were going to open on May 20th.
Right.
And it was only one side of the argument that was writing their legislators. I mean, I got maybe 100 emails from across the state. And I tried to explain to each one of those people that, we're debating the wrong thing. The real issue here is about individual liberty. All of these actions by the governor and the declaration of who's an essential business and what should be closed and what's not, those are all things that are completely out of touch with the American system of government. In this country, the people are citizens and they are free. We are not subjects. And the government, we do have a representative government. I appreciate the governor actually paying attention to that, except the representative government is the legislature. And we make the laws, and the governor executes them and runs and manages the government as a whole. He's not the person who's supposed to be the decider of what the laws should be. It's clear he's acting in a political manner, and that's what bugs me more than anything is that I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. I would not have wanted to be in his shoes at the beginning of this, to be really all eyes on him to make smart decisions to keep our state safe. But his obligation was really to share the facts with people, the free people, our neighbors, so that they can assess their own risk and make their own decisions.
And you bring up an interesting point, because when he was asked about this decision to disband the Reopen Connecticut Committee, he made a comment that I saw this and it was like, he really doesn't quite understand how this all works. He said, "We set policy," he said of himself and his team. "That's our job. At the end of the day, it's Connecticut policy, and we make that policy." Wow. I mean,
right?
Just wow. That is quite telling.
Yeah, I don't even have a comment. It's basic. It's the three branches of government. And right now, I'm concerned that we have only one branch of government, actually. In other states, it's starting to become more clear that the courts are being put aside. People have a Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial also, and their day in court. And our court system is largely closed. I don't know exactly who's open and operating at all, but that's another thing that's about to happen. So our legislative branch has been sent home. The court system is basically closed, and the governor is now determining what our policy is, making our laws, and he's, as you mentioned before, with employing the local law enforcement, he's going to try and be the arm of the law as well.
Yeah, the judicial branch. Yeah, trying to take over all three. Now, I want to go back to the comment that you just made just just now about giving him the benefit of the doubt and him not wanting to be the person in the position who had to make these decisions. And I have been trying to be very careful about criticizing anybody's decision because, again, we've seen so many of our elected officials, especially here in Connecticut, sitting on the sidelines and just sniping from the sidelines and just,
Right.
making comments from the sidelines that have not been helpful at all. And just no matter what decision was being made, they were against it. It was always, this is the worst decision ever. This is way too soon. This is way too late. Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? I've been trying to stay out of that game because these are unprecedented times, and it's almost impossible to make all the right decisions. So I'm not expecting anybody to make all the right decisions, but I have been watching what's been going on with kind of a skeptical eye as to, okay, let's see how far this goes. And we're seeing that some governors around the country are almost enjoying this moment where they have all of this power, and they're really using it every chance they get. And as the governor just extending out this state of emergency, as you say, almost all the way till September, they're starting to sort of make me question why they're doing some of the things that they're doing. Is this because of wanting to keep everybody safe? Because again, as you wrote in your statement here, the original argument was we need to flatten the curve. We need to flatten the curve so we don't overwhelm the system. We need to understand what's going on here. We need to protect our elderly. And we've done all of that. As the governor said the other day, we've met all the metrics. So now why are you extending this state of emergency?
Yeah, I completely agree, Steve. That's one of the most difficult aspects of serving in legislative office is that no matter what you say, it's going to be interpreted by some people as simply a matter of partisan politics. But I assure anyone listening that is not the case. If this was a Republican governor doing the same actions, I would be saying the exact same things. I am concerned about one thing, and that is preserving the American system of government and protecting the rights of my constituents. That is it. I did give the governor the benefit of the doubt to begin with. I did not, question his actions initially. I shared his daily briefings and the information contained therein with my constituents. I did it faithfully, and I did it even if I didn't agree 100% because I felt that was my responsibility and my role during that initial period when we were all fearful this was going to turn into an unbelievable pandemic. And, as the president originally announced, there's the potential of millions of people dying. The fact is that didn't happen. There are some people in this in the news media that are still trying to, inflate the damage done by the virus. That's not to minimize it either, but we have to be honest about what it is. It's a severe virus. It is more significant than a deadly flu situation that might happen, but it's also not The Walking Dead and 2 million people across the country are going to die. There's not bodies in the streets. It is clear that there is a population, particularly elderly people and people that have comorbidities, that are definitely much more at risk. And if we could go back, I think we should follow the Sweden model, which was to protect that population and use our resources for that purpose. And the more importantly is that it's not the role of government necessarily to make a lot of these decisions, and certainly not in a free America. As I said before, the government's role is to provide the information so that free people can make their own choices. And I think we would have been better off ultimately. And you can see now that all of the actions taken by our governor and other governors across the country, they don't fit within the model of a free market economy, just for countless reasons. And, I fear there's going to be lawsuits after this. It's going to be a mess. And someone has to speak up, Steve, really. I think that's more important than anything else. Is somebody has to say, hey, by the way, I understand what you're trying to do, and I know you're claiming you're doing for good purposes, but whether it's for a good purpose or not, you shouldn't be doing things that are unlawful. And I also would say that with regard to the hair salon 520 flip-flop, no matter what side of that issue you're on, whether you are on the side that salons should be open or closed, you should recognize that there is no way that it is right for the governor to have said weeks ago that 520 is the open date And on May 18th, midday, a day and a half beforehand, after all preparations were made, to change his tune on that subject. That's just wrong and irresponsible. It's bad leadership. And somebody should say so. I mean, and, that's what we're here for.
Final question for you, Senator Sampson, and that is this idea of, you mentioned individual freedom, but also precedents are being set here that I'm really concerned about going forward, because it seems like once they got to where they wanted to be, once the governor got himself in a position where he could now issue executive orders, it's easy to take that power. It's very difficult to relinquish it, and it's even sometimes more difficult, as what you're seeing and what you're proving here, to take that power away. Because now we have something we can fall back on and say, well, under Governor Lamont, when this happened, this is what was done, so there's precedent. And that concerns me, because I see that being misused by people who are in government and want to be in these positions for the power.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we're seeing more and more actions that seem to be motivated more by politics than public health each day. One standout example is this notion that come August, we're going to have a statewide mail-in voting system as opposed to a typical election. And certainly I'm not opposed to the existing absentee ballot system. I think it's necessary. I think it does present some problems and opportunities for fraud. But I believe that this might be a very controversial statement, but I believe that this is being done for absolutely 100% political reasons. The Secretary of State knows the problems that are going to be associated with doing a mail-in absentee ballot program for the entire state. There are tens of thousands of extra voters on the voter rolls who are ballots will be sent out. And what will happen with those ballots? Will they be completed and be sent in unlawfully? If you talk to a registrar of voters from anywhere across the state, they can tell you that they've had problems. Absentee ballots are intercepted in urban areas for entire apartment buildings. Absentee ballots are completed for nursing home patients without their knowledge. It is just an unbelievable opportunity for fraud. And my concern about the whole issue is, look, I want to make sure every American has the chance to cast their vote. But elections only matter if they are honest, and we know that the results are truthful and there's some integrity to the process. And I believe that, first off, it's way too soon to be making a decision about August. It's completely unnecessary. If you're opening up most businesses, and as the governor pointed out numerous times, 2/3 of things have been open all the time, then why is it so necessary to change our election process? I just don't think it is.
Well, and the Secretary of State, Secretary Merrill has been pretty loose when it comes to how she's going to do this. She's not, again, going before the legislature and trying to get anything changed by passing a law or anything like that. She's not going before any judge or judicial branch to say, here's how we're going to interpret this. She's just saying, this is what we're doing. And I've heard statements from her in the past. We've actually spoken in the past. She flat out denies that voter fraud exists. And in fact, she is so adamant that voter fraud doesn't exist that she doesn't want to assist or engage in any efforts to determine whether or not voter fraud exists or not. We saw that when President Trump was first elected and tried to put in this commission to look into voter fraud, potentials for voter fraud, what is happening in our voting system. And she just refused to participate. And to me, it's like, look, if you are so adamant that voter fraud does not exist, wouldn't you want to prove that?
Right. Yeah, no, this Secretary of State has hampered any effort to actually find or deter voter fraud, which makes it very difficult. But nonetheless, there is plenty of evidence that it exists. I wrote an op-ed recently, and I itemized some of the absentee ballot election fraud that has occurred. Not even all the other types of election fraud that have occurred in recent years. I mean, think about it, Steve. Almost every election day, the next morning when we wake up, there's a report. Bags of ballots found in Bridgeport, or the polls were open for an hour extra, or they ran out of ballots in this particular place, or it's unbelievable what a mess our elections have become. And for our Secretary of State to be, talking as if we have the finest system in the entire country. Plus, there's a lot of misleading going on. They're going to spend all kinds of money about cybersecurity for voting. But you realize that, our elections are not done electronically. You cast a vote, it goes into a machine, and there's an actual tape that prints out of that machine. It's not connected to the internet. You don't need cybersecurity to protect against that. And I think that's, that was the whole Russian, collusion scandal, too, was based on this idea they were trying to paint for people on the street that somehow there was election meddling electronically, but that's never happened. It happens because of the way ballots are collected and counted and whether identities are being used or whether legal citizens are engaged in the voting process or people who are not. I mean, that's what happens.
Well, hopefully you're pushing back against what the Secretary of State is trying to do here, because it seems to me that she's just arbitrarily changing the meaning of the statutes to expand it out to make this happen, and she's doing it with the assistance of people like Senator Martin Looney. Senator Looney.
Can I say one other thing about that, Steve?
Sure.
To know that just a handful of years ago, I don't remember when it was, I think it was in the 2016 election, one of the questions on the ballot was whether or not we should have no excuse absentee voting across the state. And guess what? The question lost. The people of the state have already made this decision. Not even the legislature, which, it comes up almost every cycle, and we defeat that bill. And we've actually had a statewide election or a vote on that subject, and it's also a no. So now it's unbelievable to me that it's going to happen via executive order because the Secretary of State is pushing our governor to make it happen.
Yep. Well, all kinds of things have been happening over the last couple of months that really are disturbing. And again, I'm more concerned, or as concerned, if not more, about the precedents that are being set as we move forward on this, because without any pushback in efforts like yours, they're just going to say, well, look how easy that was to do. Let's try that again, and find something else to use to justify it. And we, like I said, I'm not immediately knee-jerk complaining about any decisions that are being made, but I am skeptical as I see them starting to continue to expand out the use of this power, especially as the numbers are going down. We're meeting the metrics, and people are wanting and dying to get back to work here. And the governor, just by stroke of a pen, is saying, "Nope, sorry, I'm not going to allow it." It's like, well, sir, you don't make that decision. You don't have that power unless we freely give it to you, and we have not.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone who's curious to go through the executive orders and look at them in detail. I mean, most of the stuff is not reported, but there are numerous items every day that become a part of those orders, and more each day, I believe, are more political wish list items than they are items about our public health. Allowing home care folks who are relatives to be paid. This is something that they've been trying to do in the legislature for years, and they see an opportunity to make it happen. Is it a good policy or bad policy? That's something that should be debated by the legislature. They failed to pass it as a law. It's just not right for the governor to do it as part of an executive order now.
Absolutely. Senator Rob Sampson, sir, I always appreciate your efforts. Where can people find this statement that you released?
I put it on Facebook and also on my official state website, which is senatorsampson.com. I'm always happy to be on your show, Steve. Thanks very, very much. You do a great job making sure the information is in front of the people, and I appreciate the opportunity anytime I get it.
Well, thank you for your kind words there, Senator, and we'll look forward to having you back. Keep up the good fight.
Excellent. Take it easy.
Take care.